This week, Baruch Hashem, we're starting a brand new Sefer Vayikra, Parashat Vayikra, a harder Sefer. It's known in English by the Latin Leviticus, the book of the Levi'im. It's known by Hazal as Torah Kohanim. It's the laws of the Kohanim. And the laws of the Kohanim are difficult. It's a lot of sacrifices, very details, comparing, contrasting this sacrifice with that sacrifice. How do you do the avodah properly? And then it expands to other areas of purity and impurity of Tahorah. And again, it's a complicated Sefer. But there's a beautiful idea beautiful minhag actually that we have that it's a sefer that we actually teach our little kids. So a little bit of background of the customs nowadays. We do this here in Israel. At age 3, there's custom nowadays to grow out the child's hair long, and then we do what's called the halakid, the upshare. There's all different ways of pronouncing it, but you cut the little boy's hair at 3 years old, and you bring him into the Beit Midrash, you bring him into the yeshiva, and he learns the Aleph bet for the first time, and he actually licks honey on top of the Aleph bet to realize that the otiyot of the Torah are so sweet, and Torah is going to be so sweet, so it's a cute little minhag. Then at age 5 comes the time when it's time to teach the kids Torah, Chumash. Now, where do we start? So, says the Midrash Tanchuma, it's a minhag over here. I did it with my little Shlomo when he was 5 years old. We start teaching our children the book of Vayikra. Why? So, says the Midrash, Midrash Tanchuma, Parashat Tzav, section Siman Yud Dalid. So it says as follows: Amar Rav Asiya, said Rabbi Asiya, so he asked the question, why do we have this custom that the tinokot, that the little kids, they start learning Parashat Vayikra? Because all the halachot of korbanot are written there. And also because they are tahor, they're pure. Ad achshav, they didn't do anything wrong. And these little children, Baruch Hashem, these 5-year-olds, they haven't tasted the taste of sin. These are pure neshamot. They're tehorim. Therefore God said, so God said, let's start with the korbanot. Yavo tehorim. Let the pure ones learn the laws of purity. A beautiful idea of our beautiful children. Let them come and learn the laws of purity because they are so pure. And then it goes on to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to look at them as if they actually brought the korbanot themselves. And since the Churban Abayit, he says, and there's no korbanot, it's only the tinokot that are reading the korbanot. That's the reason why Ha'olam Omed, the wild midrash over here says, if not for our children learning Sefer Vayikra, the world wouldn't stand. They're, so to speak, doing the avodah. The world stands on 3 things. One is the avodah, one is the korbanot. It's that children learning at the pure children who haven't tasted sin. When they learn the Torah, that actually, it counts as if they're bringing the korbanot itself. Yishtabach Shemo. That is the Midrash Tanhuma. Okay, beautiful. So we take our children, we bring them up to Sefer Vayikra, and now we learn about Vayikra. Now, if we open up the very first word, Vayikra, so the famous Dvar Torah that everybody likes to speak about, Vayikra is a hard Sefer to come up with Divrei Torah because it's so nitty gritty, but the beginning it becomes like a popular area. Why? Because you look at the very first word of Vayikra, and Vayikra is spelled with a little baby aleph, what's called an aleph ze'ira. So it's the famous question, why is there a small aleph? If I'm mistaken, I believe it's the Abir Yaakov, the Baba Sali's grandfather, wrote 50 perushim on this. What is this tiny aleph? I think we spoke about this in the past with the Sha'ar Nun, that it might be a hint to the Sha'ar Nun. There's hints to Rabbi Akiva over here. A lot of deep ideas, but let's go with the simple pshat, and then B'ezrat Hashem, let's try to take it a little bit deeper with some chidushim. Okay, so the classic pshat is the Baal HaTurim. Says the Baal HaTurim, Aleph the Vayikra, Ze'ira. He's asking, why is the letter Aleph? It says Vayikra with a tiny Aleph at the end. Why is it so small? Moshe haya gadol ve'anav, because Moshe Rabbeinu was great and he was humble. Lo atzah lichtov ela Vayikar. Moshe Rabbeinu was so humble. He didn't want to write, he only wanted to write the word Vayikar. Now what's the difference between Vayikar and Vayikra? So says the Baal HaTurim, Leshon Mikreh. In modern Hebrew, you have kara with an aleph, kara with a hey, kara with an ayin. But kara, Rashi tells us Vayikra is lashon of chavivut. It's love. It's lashon chiba, says Rashi Bayas. Hashem is calling out to Moshe Rabbeinu with Vayikra with an aleph. But it says the Baal HaTurim now, basically, Rashi says that it's a language of love, language of chiba, a language of calling out. But now says the Baal HaTurim, because he was such a big anav, he didn't want the language of Vayikra with an aleph. He wanted the language of mikreh. So if you drop the aleph, it's like from the lashon of kara with a hey, which means just kind of happened. It's not like a face-to-face deep level of connection of lashon chiba. It's like kind of happened. Like God kind of spoke to him like in his dream. As it says by Bil'am, because a similar language you find by Bil'am, that God happened, the evil Navi, God just happened to speak to him. It's not this language of love. That's the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. V'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says God to Moshe Rabbeinu, lichtov gam aleph. He says, no, you have to write the aleph. ושוב אמר לו משה מחמת רוב ענווה שלא יכתבנו אלא קטנה יותר משאר אלפים שבתורה וכתבה קטנה. And furthermore, Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, please, can I at least, if I have to write it, if you're really making me write it, can I at least write it a little bit smaller so people won't see it? And this is considered now, when we look at the small, it's funny, because now you wrote it smaller out of his anava, so it looks like a Vayikra with like the naked eye to the Torah, or it's like a little bit, what is that little Aleph over there? Oh, Vayikra. But now it also gets us thinking, why is it so small? Because we can think about the beautiful humility, the anava of Moshe Rabbeinu. Actually, later on in the Torah, when Moshe Rabbeinu is called an anav, in the word anav as well, the yud is tiny over there as well. Because again, Moshe Rabbeinu is so humble. He doesn't want people to like, oh, look at how great Moshe, look at how gadol he is, look, it's a Vayikra. No, he's always trying to be humble. He always has this level of anava. Okay, beautiful. That's the Vayikra. Actually, if you want to get a little more mystical, with what did you do with the extra ink? Moshe Rabbeinu is writing the Sefer Torah, and now he writes a small olive. So spiritually, what happened to the extra ink? So there is this whole idea that the special ink came on his head, on his forehead, on his metzach, and that turned into the glow that Moshe Rabbeinu had. And some say that also relates again to the sha'an, the deep Torah that he had. So a lot of deep ideas for the small aleph, but the simple Balaturim, it came to teach anava. Okay, so I heard a beautiful idea from my Rebbe of Eitan Feiner. Says Rav Feiner, he says, this is not the only place that we find Vayikra in the Torah. We have Vayikra earlier on, towards the end of Shemot, when we were building the Mishkan, and God calls out to Moshe. We have Vayikra a bunch of times with a big aleph. Why all of a sudden now in the book of Vayikra we don't have a small aleph? Like, what's going on over here? He says also, this is not the only place we learn about anava. There's a couple of key times throughout the Torah where we learn about anava. So where do we learn about anava? So he says, the first thing is that actually the creation of the world. They say, where do we find the greatness of God? Say Chazal, we find it wherever he creates, wherever he created the world. Why? Because how did Hashem create the world? By humbling himself, by doing what's called simtzum according to the Kabbalah, holding himself back to create the world. We already see the anava of God, and God holds himself back so that we can exist as well in the world. So we see the anava in the actual creation of the world. But it goes further than that, because we have this famous Dvar Torah we spoke about many times in the past. When God creates man, it says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man. Who is God talking to? It's a pasuk of a plurality. It talks about, it makes all those Bible critics speak about polytheism. Like, why would Hashem write a word that's so complicated? You know why? Because the bigger lesson over here is all about anava. It's all about humility. And God is saying, I'm going to speak to those malachim before I create the world. And to teach us the language of anava, he's going to have the risk of the Bible critics, because it's so important that when the world is created, and then when man is created, that we understand the concept of anava. We also find the concept of anava when it comes to Torah. When Hashem gives the Torah, where does he give the Torah? He gives the Torah in the Midbar. Why in the Midbar? In the desert. It's desolate. There's nothing there. It's the place of not of greatness. And we know the famous Torah about Har Sinai. Har Sinai was the lowest mountain of all the mountains. If you like gematria with a +1, Sinai with the kolel is the same gematria as anava. Hashem gave the Torah on Mount Sinai because it was known as the smallest mountain. And anybody who knows Parshat Yitro, your kids come home from Gan, they're going to come home with a little tiny mountain and say, oh, Hashem wanted that mountain. He gave us the Torah in the desert, where it's also symbolizing there's lack of greatness there. On Har Sinai, which is the humblest mountain, to Moshe Rabbeinu, the most humble person in the world, it's all about the anava. Even the word anava, ayin nun vav hey, symbolizes Torah. We have to have anava when it comes to learning Torah. Ayin is the shivim panim la Torah. Nun is the shar nun, the 50th gate of Binah that we're trying to get to the nun share Binah. We have the vav is the Mishnah, the 6 volumes of the Mishnah. Hey is the Hamishah Hamshei Torah. So we have ourselves the anava is all about learning Torah. Okay, beautiful. So we have anava in all these different places. Why do we have anava over here? So if you open up the Torah Temimah, the Torah Temimah gives a different reason for the Vayikra. Why is there a Aleph Zeira? Why is there a small Aleph? Why the small? So he says, you know why there's a small Aleph? That small Aleph is hinting to us, the Midrash Tanchuma that we said, that it's the small kids who come and learn Vayikra. So the small Aleph is not talking about Moshe Rabbeinu's humility, it's talking about the little children that are coming to learn Torah. Now here's where we're hinting to them with the small Aleph, bring them to learn right now. But says Rav Feiner, I think a much deeper idea. He says, comes Vayikra. We're coming to teach our children. Like we said, the minhag is the little kids come, 5 years old. We start with Vayikra. Let the pure ones learn the laws of purity. What's the very first thing that a child's going to ask his Rebbe? He's going to ask his Abba. He's going to say, Abba. The little kid's looking at the Torah. The very first thing he learns, he sees the word Vayikra. He's learned letters 2 years earlier when he was 3 years old and he was looking at the honey. And now he sees Vayikra. He sees a tiny little Aleph. He goes, Abba. Why is there a tiny Aleph? Rebbe, why is there the first word I'm learning, a tiny Aleph? And the Rebbe looks at the little boy and says, you want to know why? Because in Vayikra, we're learning about the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. We're learning about anava. You want to come and learn Torah right now? You have to know the greatest person in the world who brought us the Torah, Torah Moshe Rabbeinu. You know what made him so great? You know what made him the ability to learn the Torah, to teach the Torah? Why Hashem picked him? Because he was an anav, because he was humble. And if we want to learn, and we want to learn Torah right now, we're going to start with Vayikra. The first lesson we teach the kids, if you really want to learn Torah properly, we have to be an anav, we have to be humble, and that's going to be our ticket to success. Shabbat Shalom.